Hey guys, this is JJ Andy representing Crypto Grinders, and we are very happy and proud, right, that we are hosting one of our biggest coin that's upcoming, Wabi, and their co-founders Alex and Yes here today, and we are very excited that they are here, right? So, very welcome to Singapore. Yeah, this is like, is it your first trip to Singapore or is it your first time?
It's my second time.
Your second time? Yeah. Cool. So how do you find Singapore thus far?
Warm.
Okay, great. Okay, so of course, Alex and Yes here represents Wabi and Walimai, right? And I understand that the company has been around for 4 years, right?
Well, it was, as an idea, it's been around for 4 years.
Right.
As a company in the business that we've been running full time, it's been 2 years.
2 years.
Well, 2.5 now.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, how do you met and what's the background?
So we essentially went to the same high school,
Right.
went to the same university,
Okay.
and after that we went to the same industry but in different companies. We
Right.
both went to consulting essentially.
Okay.
And at some point in time we ended up in China,
Mm-hmm.
with Alex being in China full time, and after 4 years straight I left China.
Mhm.
We were discussing like what's going on in China essentially, and then the problem of fakes came up. And at the same time I was working on a baby formula project for in consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And then we thought that, well, there's really should be, something should be done about it. And we can definitely start with the infant formula because it's really the biggest problem. And it's the problem with where the most. It's not just the biggest problem as in money. What is it? Money losing thing due to counterfeiting that a lot of designer clothing faces, but it's a problem that actually claims lives, as sort of all the numerous scandals with fake baby formula demonstrated.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started thinking about Wabi. Wabi it didn't have a name back then. So we started thinking about the solution. We looked at all different types of sort of technologies and essentially settled on RFID.
Right.
And so that's essentially how it started.
Okay. So what is your motivation behind the counterfeit business? Is it what you just mentioned, or so why counterfeit business?
Well, let's say anti-counterfeit, not counterfeit. It's just on some of the descriptions about some anti-counterfeiting blockchain. I've seen a description that it was saying, so this project is a blockchain for counterfeiting. No, it's a blockchain against counterfeiting. So the initial motivation was, for me, it was a bit of a personal problem almost. I was in Hangzhou. I was trying to buy alcohol, right? And sometimes buying it would be fake. Sometimes it would be not fake.
Okay.
But I would be always worried. Right, so it was always a friend would be going to Hong Kong. I would always say, "Yeah, can you buy some?" And bring it, just not because it's cheaper. I don't think it's much cheaper in Hong Kong, but because you know that it's real. You know that you're not going to have it the next day. And that's just people and alcohol. And then when I was speaking to Yaroslav and he mentioned baby food, I didn't know so much about it then. We started researching it more and I thought, wow, this is crazy. Like there's people who are dying because of the problems. Then it brought a lot more of the motivation, which was not directly personal at that point. It was a lot more idealistic. Yeah. So it's like, well, this should be solved. And then we started digging deeper into the problem of the business side and the technology side. And then we realized that it's just the problem is huge, and it's China, but it's not just China. I've seen friends of friends who've been having problems with medication for their child. They were buying it in Russia and it was not working, just not working at all. It was critical medication. And once they started buying the same medication in Western Europe, it started working.
Okay, that's cool. So how big is the team now? And where are they based at?
So they're based in multiple locations. We have 2 locations in China. One is in Jiaxing City, one is in Shanghai. And then we also have part of the team in Belarus. And we have some team or partners. It's a very close partnership relationship, I'd say, in the Netherlands, where they place our labels on the baby food right now. The total size of the team,
Depends how you count.
Depends how you count. Yes, some people like the designer, right? Sometimes they come and then they go, they're not full time, some full time. But I think rough sense about 15-20 people, I think is right.
Wow, that's nice. Okay. Right, so we're gonna move on to the fundamental questions. I think I've scanned through the Slack community and also the Telegram group, and I realized there's a lot of repeating questions that I think we should kind of like highlight once and for all. Yeah, so I think that will help all of you a lot, right? So the first question will of course be on business model, right? So I think Wabi and Walimai's business model, it's idealistic, but it's logical. Like it has to be done. Someone has to do it, right? So the first question is on okay. So your business model allow us to buy Wabi off exchanges or directly from Wabi wallet in the future, right? So Wabi token can then be used on Walimai to purchase products that are certified by suppliers to be authentic. So my question is, what is next? What can Walimai be used for in the future? Or what can Walimai's token or Wabi's token be used to generate profit? How does it generate profit for your company in that sense?
Okay, to me, I can start with this. I think we could sort of address to look at it from the sort of our vision in terms of what we're building, because I think that the role of Wabi will kind of come in naturally with this vision overall. So basically, what we're building is a safe channel for consumers, because our products separate the essentially products that have the label and products that don't have the label, and this effectively creates sort of a sub-channel, which if you buy it with the product with the labels, then you're sure that effectively this is an authentic product. The packaging has not been opened, has not been tampered with, and it sort of conforms to some sort of basic level of safety and service. So we're building this omni-channel. Effectively now we're selling it online. We're selling it offline through an offline to online kind of terminal in baby stores. And as we see it, we want to expand both our presence in the channels as well as sort of increase the range of products that we offer through the Walimai channel. And the Wabi token, it is an essential part of the system, effectively, because once it has a very functional role in it, because our anti-counterfeiting technology is based on one of its elements is the perpetual churn of data within the system, which makes the cloning of the chip, which essentially plagues all RFID solutions which only rely on cryptography to protect them. This churning of data and of changing codes both on the chips and on the sort of remotely hosted, if you want, digital copies of this product, it makes it impossible to clone these things. It makes it completely, it's just infeasible, because if you clone the chip, you have so you incur some expenses, and once you place it back into the circulation, the data has already changed, so your products will not authenticate effectively.
It's the example of the banking access, online banking access device with the changing code, the Google Authenticator. It's the same idea, which essentially we have in every one of these labels, the changing codes.
Okay. And so essentially, we have to make sure that people are scanning our labels with an app, with our app, because it ensures that this data is changing constantly. But the problem we see is that it's just, I guess, it's just natural complacency. Is that if you buy from the same safe channel and you have never had any problems, you just stop being vigilant. And at some point, we just fear that sort of the level of scanning can go too low for this state of churn in the system. Therefore, we need to incentivize our consumers. Therefore, we give them this Wabi token. Essentially, they will mine the Wabi token for free by scanning the product. And so by scanning the product, they will be giving us, essentially, they will be providing us with a service of creating this collective security within the system. And for that, they will be awarded with a Wabi token, which then they can spend on products effectively within the Walimai ecosystem.
We're essentially incentivizing this individual action which creates the collective benefit, the collective security for the whole system. So that's the first and actually very important use of the Wabi token on the system. And I guess I'll carry on. So on the second usage of the Wabi token, that's a lot closer to a standard points system, whether it's air miles or any points in any of the big retailers, right? So there, we don't want to fix the exact usage there, because it's essentially the merchants will decide, right? The marketing teams, the marketing people will think, okay, we want to do this program, we want to do this mechanics, and they will decide how they use it. So essentially driving the usage of the Walimai channel Wabi safe channel and bringing more consumers to use the product. And that's actually why we're reserving half, 50% of the tokens are being reserved for that purpose, where they will be slowly fed into the system and only used to increase the usage of the system through giving them as additional bonuses to the consumers.
So to summarize, it's more like creating an ecosystem within Wabi itself, and essentially rewarding them such that they will be a long-term customer kind of logic. Alright, see that?
Yep.
So it's make it sticky, right?
This is good.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Great. So the next question I have is from the white paper. This is just reading through and just analyzing. You mentioned China and Nigeria, right? Being some of the world's the counterfeit issue in these two countries. Where else, like which other parts of the world that you think, or both of you think that expansion could be possible?
So when thinking about this, that's always a combination of country and products. Sometimes channels as well, mostly countries and products. So in China, there's just a lot of products where it's relevant, and such a big country and such a big problem there that it's kind of a business in itself, and this is where we think it can be just big on its own. Then we keep hearing that there are counterfeits in South Asia and Southeast Asia in some of the countries. I guess less in Singapore, but more in Malaysia and Indonesia. And this is where we didn't go too deep yet, but people normally speak about the standard range of products of pharmaceuticals and alcohol sometimes.
Well, recently we've been approached by this, is it a medical device producer?
Yeah, there's a medical device producer that produces in Europe and sells in the US. Yeah, and it's a very different market, it's a very different product, but they've approached us and they said, guys, we love your product, we want to use it on our medical devices. Yeah. So again, and we didn't even think about that market yet. Yeah, then Nigeria and South Africa, we had someone, actually I think one of our contributors approached us and said, look, I want to bring your business to South Africa, we have a big problem there. So that's something we didn't expect initially, but then people are coming up to us asking, look, can I use your technology and your product there? So then in terms of usage of the technology of the labels, of course we would love them to bring it to their own country, but then Wabi comes with them, because for them it's actually not that we have to force them to use Wabi. No, we're actually giving them an additional kind of tool or cover to provide not just the technology but the service to your consumers, right? So that they don't just get a product with a label which is safe, which is a big thing on its own, but they also get all sorts of marketing benefits that they can get with it in terms of labels.
Right. Great. Okay. So now that we're talking about China, right? Let's talk about what is happening in China right now, which is the regulations, right? How has it affected your business model at this moment?
So the way that it affected our business model, first, we will not be, at the ICO itself, we will not be selling to Chinese citizens and residents.
Right.
And it's unfortunate to us because they are the people who feel a lot this problem. Right. So they understand it, they understand our solution, and they could be great support to us. But right now we feel that it could be risky for the project, even though it's not directly illegal. It's illegal for Chinese companies to raise money through ICO in China. We're not doing that. We could sell to residents in China, but it may be risky. So we decided, to stay away from the gray area. That's the first thing. And the second thing, in terms of the operation of the token, the way that it affected us is we will need to set up essentially like a mirror system, where in China it will not be the ERC20, or it will actually not be the token that will be operating, it will be a point which will be operating. And I won't go into too much detail right now, but essentially we describe it in the white paper right now. You can see how it will work.
Yeah, so essentially it's a mirror system which is linked to Wabi, essentially. So it works in exactly the same way, but it sort of allows us to bypass this the firewall of which prevents us from moving token cross-border in China.
And with that system, we're also able to control the points. It will not be tokens, it will be points in China, with a bit more control. Just so that we're also being careful about not stepping across the line where we shouldn't. And these are the details of the way that these points are being used in terms of the maximum number of points that can be held by an account, in terms of their transferability between accounts, and lots of other small things.
Okay. So in a nutshell, we're aiming for maximum allowable standard for loyalty programs that exist in China already, so we're kind of compliant with the regulation.
Right. I mean, because China will be our main market, so there's a lot of considerations here, definitely, right? So, I mean, some people in the Telegram chat are asking, are you going to be launching in US then? I mean, because of the SEC, will you be launching in the United States? Yeah. Okay. How about Singapore?
We'll see. I mean, we have kind of a preliminary answer, but let our legal advice just tell us first, and then we'll tell everyone. Let us not claim anything else.
Okay. So, Alex, and yes, the next question, right? So, how do you see yourself different from Embryos, right? The Ember coin. So, it's by a Swiss company. It's a Swiss company. They mentioned they have very strong advisors backing from Swiss authority, but they're more or less focused on food and pharmaceutical, right? And their idea is to have smart tagging, unique ID, and anti-tampering mechanism, so that can speed up the transaction. So how do you see Wabi can stand out against them, or what's your take on this?
I think there are a few differences. I guess I could start and then if I'm missing it.
Sure.
So first, I think it's the stage of development. We didn't research their project too much. We looked at them as somewhat a competitor, just to understand what they're doing. It was very interesting. And one of the interviews, there was, I think, one of the technology guys from maybe CTO, maybe someone else. He was asked, okay, so at which stage are you? And his answer was, we're at initial proof of concept. So the way we thought about it, okay, so there's the commercial viable product. There's a product that is in beta testing. There is an prototype. There's an MVP. There's the concept. And then there's the initial concept, and there's initial proof of concept. So that's a bit early, right? Okay. We're kind of on the other side of the scale. Right. So that's one thing. Second thing, the way that they describe the project and the kind of technology that they will use, it sounds very challenging. In terms of the technology, it sounds super challenging, which if it works, great. But at this point, especially if they have not moved too far in terms of the product, I would feel it's a bit risky in terms of their chance of being successful with it. If they are, I think it's great. If not, then it will work.
Just there's like a very minor point. I think essentially becomes a very major point, and I think we address it in the white paper. This concept of what we call it a meta fragility. Essentially, how after you build all this kind of anti-counterfeiting mechanism, all this tracking mechanism, how do you make sure that people believe your message in the first place? How do people believe that what data that you feed in there is actually correct? And all the sensors, like when you do geotagging, for example, you have to make sure that the geotagging cannot be manipulated with, right? For the consumer to trust. And it's already a difficult thing to do because geotagging, like currently with the phone, it still goes through all the peripherals, and because it relies on the Android and iOS, the backend essentially, and it can be manipulated with, right? So basically, even to do a simple geotagging, which is 100% tamper-proof from not just from anyone else, but also from you, from yourself as a system operator, it's a very challenging thing. So when you're not just talking about geotagging, but you're also talking about, I think they're making the claim of kind of whether the product has been stored properly, and this is like it's just very challenging. It's a bit like going to Mars with Elon Musk. I mean, just the level of technology, I'm just not sure that if it is there. But maybe this this extent of the challenge explains the market cap that they're aiming for. That's I mean, you really probably need hundreds of millions of dollars, to build with that. We are much more modest in at least at the start of what we're targeting.
A few other differences would be in terms of geography. I mean, we don't have support of the Swiss government. We don't really do much in Switzerland. We do have support from essentially government in China. So Wabi as the company was chosen as one of the companies or projects that is supported by the government in Jiaxing. We received a significant grant from them, and I think you've seen the videos. We were also chosen by the invasive companies presenting to Li Keqiang and Smith of Russia. So there is that support as well.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's a difference or not. In terms of geographies, I think it's different, right? Our bigger markets is China, and we have more of a support in China.
Right.
Support in Switzerland for us would not be as relevant. So depending on where they want to go later on, I guess support in Switzerland could be the right one for them.
Right, cool. Okay, great.
Last thing I think is very important difference is in terms of business model, whether it's B2B or B2C.
Right.
The way that they describe themselves looks a lot more B2B, and there's just one way of doing things. For us, it's a lot more B2C. We're not building a service for producers right now, right? We're building a safe channel for consumers.
Right.
And as the next step, once consumers are there, once the demand is there, businesses will come.
Right.
Whereas doing it directly B2B is very challenging.
Right.
Because the reason is that I think the reasoning goes that once you create a sort of nice platform, then you go have these partnerships with all these companies. So it doesn't involve money yet, and then once you have it built up, essentially all these companies will sign commercial contracts with you. And we thought the same about 2 years ago, and we tried it, and it just didn't work essentially because with the big companies, it just no matter how good your product is, it just gets lost in actually getting to implement something. It just takes a lot of lobbying effort and it just gets lost in all this sort of hierarchical.
There's a big difference. There's a very big difference between being an additional cost for a company, where you really need to prove yourself, you need to prove that they really need you and they need you right now and not 5 years later. Yeah, that's what any B2B business faces. And being an additional revenue opportunity where the company comes to you because they want to raise their sales. And because we're building the safe channel, we're becoming a channel for them rather than a cost center. It's a very different discussion. What Yaroslav was saying 2 years ago, we were actually, due to NDA, I'm not going to say the names, but we presented to two of the few biggest baby food producers, for example. We presented to one out of the 3 or 4 biggest alcohol producers in China. And everywhere it was like, oh, cool technology, a lot of interest and all that, but then it takes time and it's longer, and then you realize, okay, it's not worth my resources, let me focus on something else, and then they become back.
So basically, what we want to stress is that the road from LOI, or letter of intent, with whatever company you want to partner with, to actually having money in the bank account and actually doing a commercial project is like it's very
We've had right now though a lot of interest coming in. Like we didn't approach them coming in from one of the big cigarette producers in China. So speaking about the products, that could be another one. That could be that's a huge company with billions in sales. So let's see how it goes.
Okay, so now that Alex mentioned product, we are going into it right now, right? So which country are the products manufactured from? I've seen the video. Yeah, there are some milk powder from Germany, some Australia and other part of it. So where are they manufactured from, and where is the greatest demand from right now? As in product-wise?
In terms of products right now, you're asking the products right now. You're asking the products
right now,
2 years down the line.
Or 2 years down the line.
So let's speak about right now first. Right now it's only baby food, and the products that we sell right now are manufactured, most of them are manufactured in Europe, either in Netherlands or in Germany. They're bought and labeled there, so we place the labels there in Europe and then they're imported into China. So in terms of production, it's in Europe. In terms of sales, it's in China. I think there's one product that is actually manufactured in New Zealand, but it's small part of the portfolio. Later on, it will be the expansion in terms of countries. We want to add more things from Australia, from New Zealand. For baby food, it's very big production bases. There are things in islands.
Japan, Korea for cosmetics.
And later on, it will move into cosmetics, because especially as the customer base is very similar, moving from young mothers to people who consume cosmetics is not that big of a move. Right? So then it's Korea and Japan in terms of cosmetics. And we will also plan to add alcohol very soon. That will be a slightly different sales model there, but essentially very similar.
You could finally get some safe alcohol.
Exactly.
Okay. So this is one of the questions from our research team. So how do you ensure consistency in supply? Right. I mean, you're getting from different sources, and how do they pass your vetting process? Is there certain things that you go through? So how do you ensure that every product that's coming out from that supplier is trustworthy? I mean, so what stage of authenticity do you do? Right? As a company.
So right now it's checking the supplier themselves, checking the documents, checking the certificate of authenticity that we always request them to provide, and also sometimes testing the cans themselves, checking if it's a real product, kind of manually, randomly. We did that as well, actually.
Right, okay,
but randomly picking some of the cans and testing them. So that's something that's done. Now, at this point, it's fine, but at the big scale, that's not going to be enough. At the big scale, it will need to move closer to the manufacturer, with direct relationship with the manufacturer themselves. And if it's a relationship with the manufacturer, the manufacturer doesn't need to fake their own products. It actually helps them. So.
That makes sense. So at which stage of the manufacturing process is the sticker stick-on?
So right now, it's we place the sticker after the manufacturing process.
Right.
So after we buy the product,
leaves the
warehouse.
it's already out of the warehouse. It's already not from the manufacturer. But right now, it's a fairly manual process. Right now, the volumes are not huge. Right. So right now, the manual process is fine. So each time they place the label, they also take several pictures. And then when the mothers are buying the products, they don't just see the traceability and all the locations where it's been and all that, but they also see the pictures that were taken in the Netherlands, where our warehouse is, in the Netherlands when the label was placed. And then they compare the pictures and they say, okay, it's exactly the same. It's a bit like the stamp on the documents, you know, like you compare.
It's funny that you mentioned the pictures, because one of our competitors, I don't know, it's essentially a Chinese Daigo. You might want to do an explanation later on.
It's coming.
I mean, they're charging an extra 10 RMB if you want the photo of your product taking at the store in Germany or something like that.
Yeah, we do it for free.
Okay.
So that's how it's happening right now. But like I said, later on it will need to move at the manufacturer, the standard sticking machines that will be used to essentially reduce the cost. It's just right now the volumes are not huge, and there's no point for us to focus on kind of
essentially
optimizing a small volume. Once it gets bigger, that's when we'll optimize it.
Okay, great. So do you have any logistics partner that are planning to manage the logistics within your company? Are you working with anyone right now? There's a logistics.
In terms of logistics, it's the standard logistics companies that we're working with, and in terms of both the inland logistics within Europe, then it's the either shipping by plane or by ship to our warehouse in China, and then this logistics partner, the standard Kuwaiti.
But I think it's a good question, because essentially we don't care who ships the product, and we don't care who takes it anywhere in China, because with the label, unless they sort of make a hole in the can and dump it down, but then they can essentially deface the product, they can open it, right? So if they open it, it becomes unscannable, and you cannot you can't do anything with it.
It's actually a very important point that Yaroslav is bringing. So this makes a very big difference versus some of the big competitors that we have. I'm not sure we can call them competitors because they're huge and now. So it's someone like Jingdong, for example. For them, so they have their system called Jingdong Z, where it's they essentially rely on their own logistics so that they can ensure the authenticity of the products. Right? There's no one else in the logistics, so no one else can put stuff in.
Do you have pictures
Of what?
of the Jingdong?
But essentially, we don't need that, right? Because the label is there. We don't care through which logistics it goes, as long as it doesn't damage the product, right? But then logistics, they care about that as well. People cannot put in their fakes because the label is there, and that's first, it simplifies the logistics a lot for us. We don't need to build our own logistics, and second, it actually gives a lot more access. Right, so for a company like Jingdong, they still need to invest a lot in building their own logistics network. Right. And that's fine, it works for them. For us, we don't need that, and a lot of the local entrepreneurs or local shops, distributors, they can use our product, and we can still feel safe that it's authentic, because it's protected at the individual item level rather than through the protection of the channel.
Right. Okay. So how do you ensure the quality of the product? I mean, shelf life, expiry date, with regards to that. So how do you ensure that it's like
It's quite simple. We buy high quality products that are
It makes sense.
that are good quality brands that are very well known. That big companies, they go through very stringent quality standards,
Right.
and then that's probably the first thing in terms of the expiry dates and all that. Well, we had some of the products that got expired. Well, we moved them off the shelf and took the losses on that.
It's another thing that what label allows us to do, because with this incentive to scan, we can actually have this constant channel of communication with the consumer. Right? So essentially, there are stores in China of companies doing massive recalls, and it costs them a lot of money to do the recalls. With us, we know where a particular batch is being sold, and we can deactivate it. So essentially, with intent to scan, we can tell the consumer, don't buy it.
I'll add a more particular example. So right now, imagine that if you're a big company selling in Shanghai, in a big city, then the product goes close to the expiry date. You can send your colleagues merchandise or whoever you're working with and take it off the shelf. That's fine. But now imagine you're in a very small city somewhere in China where you don't have direct access. Or you sold it to distributor sold it to another distributor, and another distributor. You don't know where it is, right? So okay, it's expiring, but you don't know. It may still be sold to a consumer and could potentially be dangerous.
Right.
So we're actually solving that problem, because as long as the consumer is actually scanning it, we can very quickly notify them, like, look, this is expired, don't consume it. Right. If you bought it and it still says that, sometimes people can tamper with expiry date.
Yes.
Right. If the expiry date has been tampered with, we have the direct communication back from the consumer to us, and we can deal with it, both to the consumer and, if needed, through the business channels or even police.
Right. Okay. So which means to say, if let's say I would scan the bar or the code itself, it will let me know that when it's going to be expired, where has it been through, and stuff like that.
It is not, it's a data that's stored on a chip, right? So it's a passive chip again. So it's to bring it for the later discussion, Bolton coin. But this is information that for each particular product which is stored on the chip. So it's a little unique kind of product passport, if you want.
Right. Okay. So you essentially answered this: who pays for the return of products? So let's say there was a return, who pays for it right now?
So right now we're acting as a shop, right? So we're selling. So if it's returned, we pay for it. Right. I mean that's how it works in retail.
Okay.
When Wabi channel grows more into the platform, the other merchants, then if a consumer returns to a merchant, then the merchant is paying for it. It's standard trading terms. There's nothing new.
Great. Okay. So this is the question: what categories of product will you be expanding into? Right. So cosmetics, one of them. Are you going to consider technology or apparel? Because I heard New Balance in China, about 90% are counterfeit. That's what I heard. Yeah. So are you planning to get to that?
So there's a matrix, right? And then we started with the ones where we thought, on one hand, there's the need, there's the actual, not just commercial need, but the actual people's need. And also that make economic sense. For some of the products, it's just the cost doesn't make sense. It's very hard to make it work. So we started with baby foods, and like we said, cosmetics and alcohol will be coming soon, and pharmaceuticals will probably be the next target. Now, in terms of electronics, we're considering that, like with the example with medical devices, we thought that could be a very interesting pilot for us. We'll see if it worked, great, and we didn't consider it too much before. With clothing, we're a bit in two minds, to be honest, because it's a very simple thinking. If I buy a Gucci bag for $50, I know it's fake, the seller knows it's fake, everyone knows it's fake. Why would consumer check? Like, it doesn't need the label, right? And if you buy it for $2,000, and maybe people do want to check. At the same time, it's not that critical. Okay, Gucci may be losing some money if it's fake. Fair enough, but it's not critical to the health and well-being of people. So it may come later, but it's not a priority for us. An additional problem is with clothing and bags. It's actually a lot harder to build the chip into the packaging, like we do with baby food. So essentially, you can kind of cut out the chip and put on another product. So because of those two things, we're actually not moving into clothing. So
we have two more questions with regards to the product section. One question I have from the team is: are the merchants receptive to this idea? I mean, and how are the merchants benefiting from Wabi product?
So let me start with the second question, how they're benefiting. It's what they're getting with us is not it's not an additional cost that they need to pay, right? Like I was saying, we're not selling them the labels, we're selling in channels. So just like they can go online, they can go offline, they can go through the Wabi product, and that's the safe channel because the consumers are there. That's why they like or will like this channel. Right. So that's on the merchants. Then, in terms of the Wabi, which is the loyalty program on top of the channel, especially the smaller merchants. So there's small merchants and big merchants. They take it slightly different. So the small merchants, they don't have their own resources to develop their own loyalty program. So they just get it off the shelf with Wabi. It's brilliant. It's a good deal for them, right? In terms of the big ones, what often happens is that it's not the merchants, it's actually the producers. And for the producers, there's a big problem with being a single line, a single product, or kind of a very limited range of products portfolio. And then what happens is that the points, or whatever else that they're giving, has very limited use. Right? So let's say you've been buying baby food and then your baby is wrong, you don't need those points anymore. Like what do you do with them? So for them, actually giving access to other products using the same points is very beneficial. So then let's say the mother who's been buying baby food, she can earn some of the points there, and then later on she can start using it in cosmetics. That's a good deal.
That's a good deal.
Right? So essentially we're improving it for the consumer, we're improving it for the producer as well.
I mean, it's not a very new concept in itself, kind of building a loyalty program that addresses the different segments. Because if you go to Hong Kong, I think like Asian miles has been used across different things. What this project often lack is that there's like no uniting thread, essentially. Because for us, we're making the claim that we're making is very simple. If you buy our products using this loyalty program, you get safe products. So it just makes this loyalty program a bit more solid, a bit more coherent in a way that like why you can use this, essentially why you can use your loyalty points on this product and not on that product. Because for now, if you go, for instance, okay, this merchant, I mean, he made the deal, this merchant didn't make the deal, so like there's no coherence around it. You consumers don't know. With us, it's a bit more solid.
Right. So do you see yourself tackling the industry of Daigou, like between China and Australia? Like I think with where Wabi is going, it could essentially take Daigou out of business. Where do you see it? I think it doesn't make power. Would you? Do you see it that way?
Well, essentially, as I probably answered in the Telegram channel, we're surfing on the crest of the Daigou wave, because Daigou is not again, it's not a solution because it may be better because it kind of comes from Australia, but from our recent investigations, we already know about kind of the industry of warehouses in England and in other places in Europe, where they actually repackage kind of cheap Chinese-made baby powder, which is exported in bulk and put into kind of foreign-looking packaging or fake packaging, effectively, because they use the famous brands and re-export it into China as a Daigou powder.
Okay.
So now, I mean, essentially in China, every good idea becomes kind of industrialized, even if it's done by people.
Right.
And so now Daigou is no longer the safe channel that it used to be at its origin when very few people did it.
Okay.
So for us, it is we're taking over Daigou, and we'll keep doing that. We're essentially making the same Daigou channel, if you want.
Nice. You have that confidence. Okay. So we are done with business model product. We're moving on to technology, right? So this is the exciting part. Okay. So on Wabi website, you mentioned that other anti-fake systems are not very secure and whatever, right? So what makes your label different? What's the RFID technology behind it, and how do you ensure the authenticity of the product? What's so special? What's the difference?
So let me start again. So it has the. Yes, I'll show it.
You can start from the. I will start at least from the from the sort of the big picture, from the like what we're doing for the blockchain. Yeah. Anyway, I can start.
You start.
I'm hijacking this question from you.
Sure.
So essentially,
what are we doing? Like the basic claim that we're making is that blockchain cannot solve the problem of fakes in the physical world. They just because it works in the digital world, but with the physical goods, you have to ensure some way that transactions that you make offline are reflected in the blockchain, and they have to be reflected there with 100% consistency. But I think there is no way to do it now unless you're dealing with something like diamonds, because for instance diamonds have a very unique, every diamond is unique in its sort of crystal structure, so if you scan it in a certain way you can codify it. It becomes a kind of a unique and copyable element which is embedded in the product itself. So now there's a startup called Avaledger that did blockchain for diamonds. We're dealing with consumer products, and for consumer products, it's with the current state of technology, it is impossible to uniquely to make kind of this unique scanning of every milk powder. Probably every, or probably on the microscopic level, every kind of unique powder is unique, but it's just impossible to implement it this way.
On the other hand, for the consumer, we can't really expect every consumer to have a special tool to do the scanning. Like they can do with diamonds, right? To do that with diamonds, you also need a special scanning device that will okay for diamonds, but then you're not going to expect every buyer of a bottle of alcohol or can of powder to do something very, very special and bring equipment to scan.
So I mean, going ahead, so effectively for blockchain to work, to fight fakes in the real world, you have to make sure essentially that your product is 100% protected, right? So the way we do it is that we protect the packaging of the product with the label. So basically what the claim that we can make in terms of the anti-faking is that when the label is scannable by the consumer, it means that the packaging has not been tampered with, has not been opened with, and this way we ensure the 100% consistency between the sort of physical product and its the transactions which are reflected in the blockchain.
The digital identity of the product in the blockchain.
Yeah, so unlike, for example, with clothing, where you just put some RFID tag, for example, on some label within the clothing, it's not very difficult to fake it, right? You just cut it down, you sew it up again, and it just scans as authentic. For us, it's impossible because as soon as you try to open the packaging in any way, it just it stops scanning. Essentially, it just breaks because that's where the unique design of the label comes in. So it's not just the digital algorithm that runs in the background. It is also the physical features which are essential if you want to protect physical products, because we're essentially creating this interlink. So if you want to,
so just to go a little bit deeper on that, so the label itself has two sides. There's the physical side of protection and the digital side of protection. The physical side is to do with the materials that we use and the layer structure, the type of glue that we use and all of those things. So that on one hand, it acts as a protective layer so it doesn't damage the chip or the antenna during the normal transportation, because that would lead to products getting off the line, essentially more losses for us, for the merchants. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, it's fragile enough and sticky enough that when you open the product, it breaks, and also you cannot just take the label off the product because then it breaks as well. So it becomes impossible on physical level, because impossible to take the label out and put it onto a fake product. So that's one side, the physical side. Then there is the digital side, and this is what I was mentioning, this banking device, which is normally the best way to explain it. So on that banking device, it works with something called rolling codes. Basically, there are codes that are inbuilt into the algorithm, or they're just stored on that device with encryptions and all that. And each time you use the banking device to log into internet banking, it gives you a new code. Same with Google Authenticator. Very similar idea here. Each time a consumer is scanning the chip, the data on the chip and data at the back is changing. Data in the clouds on the server is changing. So that makes it nearly impossible theoretically and practically impossible to actually fake the chip. We've seen a lot of companies claiming that they have very secure RFID because they use encryption. And there, it doesn't quite work like that, because you can either use a very expensive active RFID, which has its own limitations, and we can go into that later if you want, or they use the non-active or the passive RFIDs. Now, the trick with encryption is that well, encryption can work, can be very secure encryption algorithm, but you don't need to understand or break the algorithm to clone something. If you have an encrypted message, you take it, you copy it, you put it onto something else, and then the system will not be able to distinguish that this is encrypted message on the same but already fake device. Right? So basically, in terms of anti-faking, it's not encrypting, it's avoiding cloning that you need, and encryption doesn't save from that. Yeah, so that's a very important decision to make. Now, there may be more things that are possible with active chips, but those are very expensive and they require a battery. If you have a battery, it needs to stay for a very long time. Otherwise, in the logistics chain, especially when it gets colder, the batteries don't work very well, it becomes a big mess. So it doesn't really work well.
But it's also like if you take FMCG plus moving consumer goods in some sort of remote villages in China or other places, they can stay for a year on the shelf, and I don't think that an active RFID chip can work, even if it's affordable enough.
The problem is maybe some of them will stay, but then let's say 10% of them go out of shelf life, and you have the consumer, it comes, it doesn't work, and then the retailer gets a bit worried that the consumer cannot scan. You gotta be careful with that. Right?
Okay. So how does Wabi or Walimai utilize the blockchain then? This is one of the questions.
So there's two blockchains, right? We're building the blockchains right now, right? I don't want to say that we have the blockchains, so we're building them. It's not operational yet. So the way that there's one blockchain is for the logistics and answer counterfeit system, and the second blockchain is for the loyalty program. And we need to use two because there's very different qualities that we need from them. So the first one, the way that it's utilized is to track all of the transactions and to have all of the data clearly of what went where, which product, with which digital identity is essentially with which owner. Right? So that's one. The way that it works well for Walimai is, well, first in terms of clarity in the data that's being generated, there's additional services that can be generated on top of that. But very importantly, it's to do with the credibility that it gives. Some people say, oh, it's blockchain, so it's going to be very secure. Well, if you have very secure server, it's kind of the same, right? You can't tamper with that too easily. However, if I have a very secure server, potentially I could fake my own data, right? And then with blockchain, I cannot do that. So we're looking at that as an organization, and we want to say that, well, even we cannot tamper with our data. It's all on blockchain, so it secures us as an organization from risks. But on top of that, it gives more credibility that people see that even we cannot tamper with it. So they trust us more, and that's the one thing that is super important for us. Right now, when we produce the labels, very often we got the question, okay, where do you produce the labels? Is it in China itself? It's like, yes, it's in China. And say, oh, but then, can't the manufacturer fake them?
Or is it counterfeit label?
Exactly. Or can't they, like, when they produce like 1,000 labels for you, can produce 1,000 fake labels? Well, they can. Fine, but they will not work because we encode them in a different place, and the manufacturer doesn't know anything about that encoding.
Right.
Yeah, when they get encoded, this is the critical piece of information that's being written onto the chip, and the manufacturer has nothing to do with it. Right. So they cannot fake the labels. Same idea with the blockchain. Now coming to the blockchain with the loyalty points, like I was saying, we'll start with Ethereum, then most likely move to a different blockchain. That is, again, the credibility in the fact that people will not be able to, or the company or us or the merchants will not be able to tamper with the value of those labels. I can tell you my personal experience with some of the airlines. Like you fly, sometimes you do choose the airline because you are part of their mileage program, right? You collect those miles. And then a year later, you realize that what used to be 20,000 miles is now 50,000 miles. And you're like, oh, why was I collecting them? And that kills the credibility of the system. So with Wabi being on blockchain, that's not going to happen. On top of that, there are additional services that again can be built in terms of the data, in terms of the understanding of the consumers. There's lots of things in that direction as well. And one important quality that we will look at when we're choosing the blockchain for Wabi itself is to do with integrations with other players. For example, if they are integrated with some of the payment methods, that could be very beneficial for Wabi because I'm speaking potentially now, but let's say we work with someone like 10x, for example. They're also based in Singapore. If I'm saying if, right, we don't have any discussion. I don't want to claim anything that's not happening yet.
Right.
But if let's say what people can pay with their 10x cards, but using Wabi, that's just an additional use case. Right. So that's the kind of features that we're going to be looking at blockchain.
But it's also just, to sort of expand on your point that blockchain essentially is a much better platform for loyalty points, because loyalty points now it's like a huge pain in the neck for a lot of companies and issuers, because they have a huge liability, so outstanding liabilities of unclaimed points that they have to keep on their balance sheets and they cannot utilize. For people, similarly, as Alex was mentioned before, it's actually the scope is too narrow and it just becomes not worthwhile. That's why only like airlines or airline alliances or like hotel chains made a successful use case for now. But with the blockchain, it becomes much more, just much easier to transfer and move around these points. It just becomes a much more valuable loyalty point from the consumer side as well. So yes,
maybe it can be very easily understood from the accounting concept. So right now, when there were some questions or maybe even issues about the way that loyalty points for airlines should be accounted on the balance sheet, and when the new rules came in and the companies had to account for a big liability because points are liability for them, there's Delta had almost $4 billion as a liability on their balance sheet, and it's kind of difficult for the company, especially if you're a traded company. It affects how you perform on the stock market and things like that. It's a pretty serious question for them. When it's a crypto point, the company doesn't have the liability. It's your crypto point, and you use it, you own it. It's not the liability of the company. It's an asset that you own.
It is not a credit instrument if you want. Yes.
Yeah, it's essentially an instrument, right? So it becomes very, very different in terms of accounting concepts then, and it works much better for the companies.
So we decided, if we want to build a blockchain, we might as well do it the right way. I mean, not blockchain. If we want to build a loyalty program, we might as well, build it on the most advanced platform available now.
Right. I guess it's even more important for Wabi or Wabi because it's anti-counterfeit, right? So it's trust is even more important. Now, question: is this technology patented, like by a company or let's say the tools that you're using?
So with Wabi, there is, at least we didn't find anything to patent right now. There may be something later on. With Wabi, we've considered the anti-counterfeiting mechanism. At the same time, we realized that patenting it will not be a very strong protection. Frankly, the biggest protection that we can have is the trust of the consumers. Is the fact that we don't have any scandals, and I do believe we will not have the scandals with the anti-counterfeiting feature because it is a strong technology. And the fact that people believe in us, that's really important.
I mean, the question of patenting actually came up in I think 2014. And yes, we spoke to a lawyer, to the patent lawyer, and did all sort of. We were preparing to file for the patent in China as well. And essentially, what we were told is that it might be better, to keep it closer to the chest. Essentially, what you are building right now, because when you are building something, when you're filing for a patent, it might not necessarily be 100% secure in terms of. How confidential it stays, right? So we were advised, just to keep it down low.
Basically, there's a time gap between the time when you file and the time when patent get issued, and that's when things may go a bit tricky. Right? Okay, that's not good.
Cool. Okay, great. So the next 3 questions will be about technology and how or the industry per se. So we are aware about Walton, right? So what we were mentioning just now. So Walton chain ecosystems, just for the viewers, right, combines blockchain and RFID technology to significantly streamline the management of supply chains, right? So what's the difference here in RFID technology, or what's stopping Walton from coming to the counterfeit industry?
Well, we're not talking about the business side. We're just talking about the technology. Technology. So I've had a brief look through the white paper. And there's a lot of good detail, which is always very much appreciated. I think if we speak about the differences, I think there's a few. First, it looks like they're developing their own RFID chip and their own RFID reader. And the second thing is that this chip looks like it will be an active chip, so with a battery, with a CPU, which is required for the encryption and decryption, which they're using as the base for the uniqueness of the chip, so it can be faked. Right. So we already touched a little bit on the active chips. Basically, with the active chips, it becomes a lot more expensive, and the fact that you have the active chips, it needs a battery, the battery might run out. It may become a problem for the supply chain. Now, I didn't go too deep into the specifics of the solution, and maybe they do have a good solution for it. Maybe they will have a battery that can last for 2-3 years. But frankly, the businesses that we spoke to, they're always very worried. They always ask this question, and we keep them at ease by saying, no, it's a passive chip. We can stay for 100 years. It's still going to be there. It's fine. With the active chip, you're not going to be able to say that. So they will need to work hard to make sure that it's a very good solution on the active chip.
Right.
So that's one thing. Second thing, in terms of the technology and the RFID is we're much closer to the user in terms of being able to having adoption of the technology. Having your own reader means that they will probably need to limit themselves just to B2B applications, because they're not going to push the consumers to buy the customized readers which work with their chips. Right? You're not going to expect people to buy a customized reader just to allow them to authenticate one product. The consumers just don't work like that. They want convenience. They want to use their own mobile phone. And that's the big difference with us. We use standard technology. We use standard chips. We use standard readers. So an Android phone, so my Sony can read, or Samsung, they can all read the chips, and we don't really need anything more customized from the consumer, apart from downloading our app and registering on it. But that's what consumers are okay to do. So these are the big differences in terms of the technology.
Yeah, I think that although we spoke about technology, not about the business, I think it's important to notice that our business model essentially is our technology works because of our business model. So our business model and technology, they are complementary to each other, because our business model enables this secure sort of collective authentication on individual level that ensures sort of this higher level security. Therefore, anyone can move into any sphere they want. But you would have to replicate a lot of things in order to achieve what we have been able to achieve with just using passive chips and, as Alex was saying, just standard infrastructure, because we'll have to implement the entire business model around it, or build something completely different. And I mean, I guess you could do that, but if you have a core that you're competent in already, I would, as a former business consultant, I would advise concentrating on the core business, because if you start venturing into greener fields, then you risk being burned. So, I mean, anyone can move anywhere, but again, it's just that sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't.
Maybe there's one additional thing. They seem to be concentrated a bit more on the garments industry, and that's fine. There's some of the garments industry B2B players, they're interested in RFID technology, and this is the industry that we're not concentrated on. Just like I was saying, we think that FMCG, the food and beverage and pharmaceuticals they have a lot clearer use cases, and that's what affects the technology development going forward as well.
And again, there was a notice on one of the reviews essentially that they still face this problem of chip and its attachment to the product that it intends to protect. So they have to make sure that the chip cannot be the product that is behind the chip cannot be easily replaced, and unless they achieve that, then it kind of becomes redundant on the consumer space.
And it's pretty much what we already sold with the label.
With the label and the packaging, right? So our claim is we're not claiming as much. So we're claiming that we can produce, we can protect packaged products. We can produce. So.
Right. Okay. Great. So this is with regards to Alibaba, right? So we know this is a giant in China. So I've read, and they are also countering counterfeits, right, in China, right? So they introduce artificial intelligence, better data modeling, and certain codes. I've seen the latest CNBC video. So how do you see Wabi fitting in, or how do you see them as a competitor in a sense?
In a way, it is. I mean, we can see it as a competitor, or we're two companies in that sense solving the same problem, right? Which we may be complementing each other.
Right.
Now, I would just explain it from the consumer side. So Alibaba is taking it kind of from the top-down approach, which is, being giant like Alibaba probably is the right thing to do. And then they try to identify, okay, where are the big pockets of conservating? This is where the artificial intelligence, the data will be able to catch. At the same time, it's not going to work very well, or I guess it will not very well at the individual item level. Now, if you imagine yourself as a consumer, you come to the shop and you think, okay, so this can of baby food that I'm buying for my baby has a very small chance of being fake. It still doesn't really feel right. So basically, you need protection, especially for the critical products. You need protection at the individual level. So when a can or a bottle or whatever else that you're holding in your hand, you know that this product is safe, this product is real. And you don't care about the 99.9% of other products that may be real or fake. What you care about is the exact can that you're holding in your hands. And that means that the technology, from the consumer eyes, the technology protection should be at the item level. So that's the big difference in terms of the approach that we have in terms of the technology.
It's also about something to do with the business model of Alibaba, as I mentioned in the Telegram chat, because they are very concerned and on the breadth of products that they offer. Because if you look at my units interviews, he compares himself to Walmart, saying that he wants to serve additional 10,000 customers. It takes Walmart, I don't know, two stores for him, just do service. But if you imagine yourself as a platform where caters for all these producers, and you say that, okay, so these producers, they can apply this technology that guarantees 100% safety. So what do you do about the rest? It's what kind of message are you communicating to your consumers? So let's say they have two merchants that have different cost structure for whatever reason, and one of them can implement it, another one can't. So it's just a huge handicap to have a platform endorsed anti-counterfeiting or a safety kind of protocol or safety label or whatever, to apply it only selectively to some merchants and not to others. And because it will be just detrimental to the breadth of offering that they have.
They basically have to make the authenticity claim at the platform level, right? They cannot say, okay, we have a small part or some part that are authentic and the other ones are not so authentic. Right? It just doesn't work in terms of the image to the consumer. So because of the size and the business model, it's kind of hard for them to make it very exact and say, okay, it's 100%, everything is authentic. It just doesn't work. And so the solutions that they're working on, it will improve the situation, but it's going to be very hard for them to solve the problem 100%.
But I think this may be not even the problem that they're trying to solve, right? For them, just reducing the level of fakes, maybe just again, as you said, on the high level, just making it a more trustworthy platform. But essentially, it's not a head-to-head competition with us because we offer 100% protection for a selected kind of. Will always still be limited range of products. Will not be like open to all sorts of cheap plastic toys, which is all Alibaba.
That makes sense. I mean, they can't be saying that this apple is authentic or this particular pear is authentic, right? So that's what I mean. Okay, great. So I understand. I'm looking at your site on onecoin.io and looking at some of the very talented advisors. Yeah, so could you just walk us through some of the advisors and their expertise and how have they been helping you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with advisors, when we were putting together the ICO project, and we thought, okay, so we need to make some of our advisors public because that's what people care about. We've been working with quite a few people, and some of them we cannot make them public because sometimes they have something in the contract which prohibits them from that. Right. Okay, fair enough, so we don't do it. That's why it actually took us some time to confirm some of our advisors. Right. It was not to confirm the advisors, it was to confirm making it public. Yeah. Okay. So I'll speak about the 4 people that we have on the website. Right. So first one is, maybe a bit about how we chose whom to publish. We thought it would be important to not just have a bunch of people with big names. It would be important to be clear on what is it that they're bringing and not having too much overlap in terms of what they're bringing, but also each one of them really helping us advise on various things. So first one on the website is Mario Pasos. So he's very well connected in the crypto world. He, as he says, he lives and breathes crypto. And he's really helping us with understanding the mechanics and understanding the crypto world, or anyone that we need to speak to. He's very helpful with that. At the same time, he used to work for MasterCard, he used to work for Citibank. So there's a lot of the financial part in terms of payments that he's really helping us with. Second one is Igor Levant. So he is my former colleague from McKinsey. But before that, he was an executive director with Goldman Sachs as well. So he's been working a lot in finance. He's done a lot of big transactions. He understands finance very well. But at the same time, he understands business very well. So in terms of the general strategy setting or any financial affairs that we have, he's really helping us with the advice there. The third person that we have on the website is Long Chiu. He's an expert in loyalty programs. So he's been working with the Intercontinental Hotels, and he's been working with Mead Johnson Nutrition. And in both companies, he was either running or very, very closely managing the loyalty programs. And this is the thing that he really knows inside out. And given that we're essentially building a loyalty program with Wabi, that's exactly the expertise that we need. So he's helping us with that as well. And I guess Yaroslav would introduce the fourth.
Yeah, the fourth is Mark Zavatsky, who is the business development director at AliExpress, which is essentially the international arm of Alibaba. And Mark is essentially an old China hand, so he knows China very well. He's been here for 15 years or so.
In China.
In China. Sorry.
No problem.
So he had very sort of colorful careers. He worked as a journalist. He had his own company, and then eventually he ended up at Alibaba. And so for us, it's very important to have his expertise in e-commerce, because he's very experienced e-commerce executive. He managed to, within I think 3 years, he managed to bring AliExpress as the most visited e-commerce website in Russia. And so he's advising us on the whole e-commerce strategy and sort of the future growth opportunities. And as I mentioned, again, sort of our growth opportunities are not just limited to country by country, but it's also sort of works well with cross-border. And him being kind of the guru of cross-border, it's really good to have him advising us on all the sort of cross-border trades and protect the opportunities that we can have with Wabi and Wabi.
So are there other advisors within the team? Do you have to mention their names, just say what expertise they bring through? Or are you looking for anyone else right now?
Not too actively. We have a lot of other things to take care of. If we meet more people and we see that there's good chemistry between, there's a good click, it works well, we will start considering. It takes a bit of time too, right? You really need to start working with the people before you can really. It's not even about the publication, it's about being able to trust the person's advice, right? You need to work with them for some time. There's a few more people that we are talking to. There's especially people on the IT who are helping us both in terms of the strategy and in terms of even checking the code that we've got. There's one of the professors from one of the top universities in Moscow. He's teaching computer science, and he's great not just at coding. He is good, but he's very good at checking the code, because that's what he does to students, right? So he's reviewing our code to make sure that we don't have any mistakes.
So Alex, yes, let's talk about the ICO stage right now, right? So on the ICO channel, there was a lot of questions asked on the pre-ICO and the current ICO. So what are some of the differences, right? And some of them did mention, will there be any dumping from pre-ICO into this coming ICO? So just share your views on that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. In terms of the difference, first, I think it's very important to be clear in the terms. There was the pre-ICO that we did. Sometimes people talk about the pre-sale and they confuse the two, and then there's the ICO that's happening. So what we did was pre-ICO, not the pre-sale. Pre-sale is something that's normally done in a covert way. People don't know about this, like things being sold. That's not what we did. What we did is the pre-ICO, which is essentially raising a small amount of money to actually run the ICO. To run the ICO, it's not that cheap. I can tell you, it's just the legal fees can be very expensive, and especially as we are working with 3 legal firms in China, and Singapore, and in the US as well. So raising that money was important for us to have a successful ICO. That's what we did. We raised $300,000 just to run the ICO itself. So we're using that money to run the ICO. So that's what's happening. And the ICO itself will be starting, so far we have a tentative date on the 7th of November. So we're moving towards that date and we'll try to confirm it 100% soon. And that's where the main ICO will be happening. So I think it's very important to be clear on that. Now, you're right, there's been a lot of questions about the dump. We sold tokens effectively at 3 cents per Wabi at the pre-ICO, whereas the price at the ICO will be starting at 15 cents per Wabi. So there's a very big gap. So we completely realize that it's a pretty big, I guess, a discount or a benefit that you can say, but there's a few things to consider. First thing, and something that people I think don't realize when they think about this dump and could it be a big thing? So we sold effectively 10 million Wabis at pre-ICO, and the total circulation supply of Wabis after the ICO will be 50 million. Actually, a bit less than that. Let's say 50 million. So that 10 million is 20% of the total circulating supply. So on top of that, a lot of people who bought Wabis in the first round, they told the community, they told us that, well, we actually want more. And when they were buying, there was a lot of people who didn't get the Wabis or pre-Wabis, who still wanted to buy, but there was no more allocation, so they couldn't. So they will come in at the ICO right now. So let's take a hypothetical example. People do dump Wabis when it hits the exchange. Let's say half of them do that. Yeah, so that's 10% of the total circulation supply. So in simple terms, let's assume that means 10% price drop. So that's 10% price drop. On top of that, there will be some people who will not be able to get Wabis for certain reasons, like they didn't pass their KYC, for example. So they can't get Wabis from us, but at the same time they managed to pass their KYC because some of the exchanges will have different rules at the exchange. So they will only be able to get it at the exchange. So the price drop will not be 10%, it will be less. And now just look at the chart of Ethereum or Bitcoin, like 10% price drop, it happens like a daily thing, right? It goes down, it goes up. So if people just focus on this potentially 10% price drop, I'm not claiming there will be 10%, right? The market will show. But if it is 10%, and if it is indeed a price drop of 10%, why do people care about it so much? That's in crypto, this is something that happens daily, and then it goes back up, then it goes back down, and that's the volatility that you just got. I would really encourage people to think about a lot more long-term things. What's the potential of the project 6 months down the line, a year down the line? How many people will be using it? That's the kind of questions that are really important.
You want to mention the numbers for the current loyalty programs, how much it's worth?
Yeah, like when we were designing the system, we were thinking, okay, how big can this get? We were looking at some of the numbers to get, just even rough sense for ourselves.
Right.
We saw that for Delta Airlines, the liability they have on the balance sheet, i.e. the value is almost $4 billion. There are other, like for Marriott, it's $2.5 billion that they have. So these are big, and it's just for one company. Yes, it's a big company, but it's just one company, right? Whereas we're building the whole channel. So it's a lot more important to think longer term and to think how big can it get, rather than, okay, what's going to be the first few days when it hits the exchanges and what's going to be done by the initial holders, and okay, the price may go down by 10%.
Then the supply is always limited at 100 million, right? So this is not changing.
So it's not changing.
There is no.
So that will not change.
There's 100 million tokens. Another thing is that during the pre-ICO, actually the average investment was like $2,000.
No, less than that. So we had about 300 people who got tokens at the pre-ICO. The biggest one was, I think, $15,000 or $16,000. I keep forgetting the number, but it was
that's
15 or 16, maybe 15. Yeah.
So that's our whale, actually.
That's our whale, yeah. And also, because we were not limiting the amount how much people could buy, there was actually no reason for a single person to split.
Right.
It was actually just making it more difficult to do the transaction. So we do believe it's actually 300 different people. Given that it's 300 different people, it's very distributed. So it's not that one whale just bought it all out and we're done with the exchange, right? It will be a lot more distributed.
So basically, with a low base, the numbers can look huge, like it's 5%. But actually, per individual, so that's not big chunk of money that they're making if they're dumping this money.
$1,000 per person.
Yeah, so you effectively $1,000, you get $5,000 back. But if you look at sort of the bigger picture, how big it can get, it's not worth it, even to dump. And as Alex was saying, even half of them decide to dump, then it's just noise in the growth.
Yeah, when we spoke to also our advisors on this, they said, no guys, don't worry about this. Like the people that we speak to, they all say, no, I want to buy more. Because also, when they bought at the pre-ICO, the project didn't look that shiny, right? We've been working on the business, we've been working on the label. We didn't have the time to really polish the project, right? It was not that good to sell.
It's like a vision they're casting.
Yeah. So people had to really believe in us. Once they spoke to us, they had a lot more faith. Right. But when they just saw the website and all that, it was like some people were worried that it's a scam.
Even some of the reviewers claimed that they had to check like several times whether the project was a scam.
Yeah, and it makes sense because we were literally just doing it back in the envelope, kind of in terms of building the ICO. We didn't hire any consultant to do the ICO. We were doing everything ourselves. So people at the pre-ICO had to have a lot more faith in us, and now, well, they did, and now they look at us like, wow, now guys, I understand your project even better. I like it more. I'm going to buy more. Like that's what we keep hearing. Whether it's going to be a lot of dumping or not, obviously we don't know, but we'll see. Like I said, it's probably not that important.
I mean, we're looking at our own tokens like for a year or something.
Yeah, the human founders will be getting tokens not at the day of the ICO, not when it hits the exchange. We're going to be getting it throughout almost a year. So 10% of the allocation per month that we're going to be getting. So if the value just keeps going down, we're not really getting anything out of this personally. So.
Very positive about it. Yeah.
So you have a stake in it in that sense. Okay. So with the ICO, the amount that you raised, what are you gonna do with it? Like, are you gonna be marketing, establishing relationship with merchants, or bringing new products? What are you gonna do with it?
Part of it is the product and the product development, but it's a very limited part. Depends on how much money you raise. Like you can't spend millions and millions on a development team, right? And we're not going to do that. The biggest part of the money will really go to development of the sales flow and marketing.
Okay.
Right. The system may be great, and I'm sure we will build a great system. At the same time, if people don't use it, if people don't understand it, people don't know it, it's useless. So most of the money will actually go to marketing and promotion of the system with the consumers, promotion of the sales, so that things are moving, the Wabis are being used, and there's a natural flow which will also help us. As long as people are using it, it gives us the data to actually improve the system. So there's like the virtual cycle that's or spiral that we want to get into.
Okay. So what is the utility value of the token then? Where can it be used for? Similar to that.
So on the system side, it's promotion of the usage, and promoting the usage on the technical side gives collective security to the whole system in terms of anti-fake. And on the other side, promotion of usage, it works in the same way as a loyalty program. So people learn about the brands, people trust the brands, people kind of keep going hand in hand with the brands, and just like any other loyalty program helps to do that. Right. So that's on the company side, and then on the consumer side, consumers will see it as a loyalty program, right? You get the points, and then they encourage you to do certain things. You get an additional discounts. You feel more attached to the brand. It's the same as with any loyalty program, with an addition that it's on blockchain, so it's actually a lot more trustworthy.
So what's the target for the ICO? How much are you targeting to raise in this?
So we will start with, we're selling 42 million tokens. 32. I'm sorry, yes, 32. 10 was sold, so 32 we're selling.
Right.
And what we will do in terms of sales is actually very different from all the ICOs we've seen so far. What we're going to do is an auction. Right. So we've considered a lot of different economic models, and we thought that the auction was really the only model that would give the real chance to anyone participating to get the share that they want to take, and B, it actually transfers most of the value that is project worth, and that value determined by the contributors. It transfers most of that value to the project itself for the development of the project, rather than to the pocket of the speculator. So the way that it will work is like an auction. People will come and register. There will be no rush with it. They'll be able to upload the money effectively and see, okay, this is how much money in USD that they're able to use at the auction. And then when the ICO starts, they can bid. It will be a very open system. Soon we'll publish some pictures and videos of usage. And people will be able to bid, saying, okay, this is how much I want to bid, which this is the price. And effectively, people who bid the highest price will get the tokens. We've had a lot of questions regarding whales joining in and kind of taking it all, and I understand these claims, I understand why people are worried about that. So with the auction system, it's effectively not going to be possible, because let's say a whale comes in and buys out the whole round of, let's say, 5 million tokens, and there's no more available in the round. Then it's very simply anyone who wants to buy 10 tokens, they can go and set a slightly higher price, and then they get it, and the allocation of the whale gets cut. So effectively, the contributors decide A, the value of the tokens, and B, the distribution of the tokens. And all of the value that the project is worth, and like I explained, determined by the contributors, actually goes to the project, and then we're going to be using this money to develop this project, right? It's not our money, it's the project money.
So in the end, at the end of the crowd sale, if you want, you'll end up with the true value. This is the truest value of the token. Everyone agrees what the market agrees on, essentially.
And just maybe to make another example, what happens very often right now is people get into some sort of a limited white list, yellow list, red list, whatever they call it, golden list, silver list, and then it gets restricted to a certain number of people. Now, a lot of the people there will be speculators. Then they buy the tokens, and then when it hits the exchange, it goes much higher because there's a lot of unmet demand, and that's when they dump it. So this system, I think it actually encourages this kind of speculative behavior and dumping of the tokens. So it's basically not going to work with us. As long as you pass the KYC, which KYC is not there to restrict the number of people. KYC is to make sure that we are good on the regulation side. We are fulfilling any requirements in terms of anti-money laundering and things like that. Right? This is the kind of thing that you just have to do. So as long as you pass the KYC, you can participate. Simple as that. There may be some country restrictions, like we mentioned. We will definitely be restricting the China citizens, China residents for regulation reasons. But other than that, anyone friendly can participate in the token sale. And I was finishing my example with the speculators. So what happens is, if they're coming from a restrictive list, there's an unmet demand, and then once it hits the exchange, the price goes up, and the speculators get big part of the value, which is actually the project's value. Yeah. So speculators are happy, but the project actually gets less money than as well. Right. Like with our system, the fair price will determine what's the project worth. And then all of this money will go to the development of the project rather than to the pocket of the speculator. And the more money we get for the development, the better project we'll be able to build, and we're going to be able to do it faster.
Right. So you mentioned there's a circulating supply of 100 million, and for this ICO it's 32 million. So what are you going to do with the rest of the tokens?
So 10 million tokens were sold at the pre-ICO. 32 million are going to be sold at the ICO. 8 million goes to essentially the extended team, and then 50 million will be kept in an escrow and slowly fed into the system to promote the usage. So if we compare ourselves to other ICOs, very often they have a certain allocation that is there to promote the development on the project, to encourage the developers, for example, right? Or sometimes it's there to encourage the partnerships. For us, encouraging the developers or the partnerships, that's less important just because of the nature of the project. So that money will go to the users, the people who buy the products with YMI labels on it, to encourage the usage of the system. So that they tell their friends and family and all the standard marketing.
And just to emphasize, this escrow will be kind of governed by very strict rules in terms of how much can be fed into the system, and will be linked to the overall circle of the sales volume, or the real sales volume in the YMI ecosystem. So.
Yeah, that is really needed to avoid the situation when there's 50 million that's being in an escrow being dumped on the markets to kill the value of the token. It's just too many Wabi, and the market is not good. So slowly it will be felt, like Yaroslav said, linked to the sales value, sales volume, which is very similar to the usage of the Wabi.
I think one of the reasons why this question was asked is because we all understand that cryptocurrency is a very volatile asset, right? So for instance, if let's say today it costs me 10 Wabi to buy a milk powder, what would happen maybe in the next 3 months it becomes, say, you can't buy more, right? Maybe 10 Wabi tokens in last 3 months ago, now you take about, say, 100 Wabi to buy the milk powder. So how do you actually keep the currency as Wabi consistent? Like how do you keep it constant?
The value on the exchange, or?
Well, I mean, the value on the exchange and the value in the system.
In the system,
it's kind of an interlinked thing.
Well, there's the limited supply overall. The circulating supply starts at 42 million and slowly grows higher and higher, but depending on the sales volume, it grows with the sales volume effectively. So that's on the supply side. On the demand side, I mean, we're going to do our best to grow the demand and circulations as much as possible. Because the bigger the system, the more sales there are, the more projects there are, the more countries it covers. Right?
The more stable it is.
The more stable it is, actually.
Essentially, I mean, we expect some volatility with the prices, at least at the early stages. But I don't think that a lot of people, this will be, on the consumer side, will be buying huge chunks of Wabi, essentially keeping them as a store of value.
Right.
Rather, they will be encouraged to use them within the system. So they will mine something that will want to redeem immediately afterwards. But as we see it, as the system grows, it becomes much more and more stable. You can look now at the sort of adoption of Bitcoin versus Ethereum, with Bitcoin being much more stable currency, just because of the general usage. And once a total token supply is in the circulation, we only expect that the value go up and the prices will be going down all the time, because it will just be of this natural demand for the product. The more transactions we generate, the more demand there is for the token. Therefore, the token holders, we expect the price to go up.
Right. Don't take it as an investment advice.
Investment advice.
Yeah, look at the
supply and demand.
Look at the size of the markets.
Right.
Okay. I mean,
so essentially,
we're big markets.
Okay, so this is an interesting question. So tell me more about the mining process for Wabi tokens. How was it created? And yeah.
Okay, so basically there will be two ways to obtain the Wabi token for the average user. Essentially, the user who buys product within the Wabi ecosystem. So one is we need to incentivize the consumers to scan the labels and change the codes. So effectively bring this individual action into sort of collective security. Therefore, we will provide it will be a mining process. So in a way that if you scan it, you get some Wabi. So it will be as simple as that. We will probably, it will be much more elaborate on the technical scale. So like how many times you can scan one product, how many products you can scan per day.
Yeah, to avoid any abuses.
To avoid these abuses, but the concept is in itself is very simple. So this is effectively Wabi will be distributed for specific behavior that we need for the system.
Right.
And the second way to obtain Wabi is by Wabi protected products and be rewarded for your purchases. And so it will work again, as we mentioned previously, as any loyalty program. So you buy something and you're awarded with a Wabi. It will be a bit different for us because we're building a platform and we're not just the only merchant in the system, or at least we don't aim to be. Therefore, different merchants will have different deals in terms of because if you look at the loyalty points, different way to look at them is discounts. So different merchants will be giving out different discounts. So the amount of Wabi given out will also be different, but still the principle remains the same, right? So you buy something within the Wabi ecosystem, you get the Wabi, or you scan, you get the Wabi.
There's actually an interesting point that comes in with the labels that you're using that helps the building of the loyalty program.
Right.
So right now, if you notice, the loyalty programs are not so big with the consumer products and a lot bigger in the airlines and in hotels.
Right.
And one of the big reasons for that is that in airlines and the hotels, you actually have the proof of purchase. right? So you know that this consumer bought this particular product.
Yeah.
It's very hard to do that in FMCG and in retail because you need a very sophisticated IT system that works with the retailer, and there's all sorts of loyalty programs, interconnectedness and all that to make it work. And also for the consumer right now, they can basically cheat that system because all the products are essentially the same. You can say, well, I bought this product, then you come back with the same can and say, oh, I bought it again. Right? Now, with the labels with Wabi labels, we're able to establish that proof of purchase, essentially, because essentially we can have people scanning before they open the product and after they open the product. So, because they open the product, they already damaged it, so
It cannot be resolved.
it cannot be resold, right? So that essentially establishes that the person has bought the product, and that's for any producer or any retailer, that's the most important event in terms of the business. If the person bought the product, that's when you really want to reward them, right? If they scan something, if they shared it on Facebook or WeChat or whatever, you want to reward them somewhat. But if they bought this, that's the way you really reward them. And this is what we're going to be able to establish in our loyalty point system with Wabi's and with our labels, whereas right now it's very hard to do that with an FMCG.
So are you gonna be connecting yourselves with social media? You know, whenever you scan, you could share on Facebook or WeChat. Is the process? Okay, great.
I mean, this is one of the standard marketing paths that people take to use the loyalty programs. You know, of course, will be part of it.
Great idea. Okay. So the next question: potential exchanges, any future partnership. So I know this could be kind of confidential at this point, but are you looking at any exchange listing or anything about that?
Of course, we started working on that, though we didn't go too far yet. I would say we didn't determine on which exact exchange we're going to list. And what we said at the pre-ICO, and that's exactly the thing that I would say now, we want to ask the community, understand what is the exchange that's going to be more comfortable and better for people who are supporting us right now.
Right.
So far we've heard Bittrex quite a lot. We heard a few other names, but I think Bittrex came out more often, and I think now as community grows more and more, we will ask this question a few more times.
Right.
And that will be, I wouldn't say 100% deterministic of which exchange we're going to list, because they might have some requirements there.
Well, because we're looking at the demography of our contributors. Like, it would be, I mean, it would not make much sense to list on the Chinese exchanges because we're not selling to Chinese citizens, right? For now, even if they were not banned in China. But so basically we'll ask the community to see which ones, whether be it US, Japan, Korea, Europe, whatever, and list that.
Great. Okay. Interesting. Which merchant stores in China will you be partnering up in the future? Like where the lease of products, so on. So this question is really just on future partnership or where Wabi is heading towards. Anything else to share about it?
So we already started working with 3 baby stores in Jiaxing City in China. And this is, I wouldn't say that it's a big partnership right now, it's a pilot for us, right? We're testing, we're improving, there's a lot of things that we can improve, we already see that. But the fact that the stores and the store owners were very excited about our products, they were very excited about the labels, the can, etc., that was a very good sign for us. So now we're going through the stage of doing another step of improvement so that we can grow a bit bigger, and we'll see again, improve it again. So that's on the baby stores and the offline channel. There's a lot more that we can do in the online channel as well, because the Wabi myself channel doesn't have to restrict ourselves just to offline or just to online, it goes across. So
social media sales,
any social media sales, any P2P sales, effectively there's a safe channel that could go through. It's a sub-channel within each channel, right? So anywhere there could be a partnership. And on top of that, there's the direct work with the producers, but I think it will take us some time to build up more of the usage and more of the people who trust the channel, who like the channel, because that's going to be the biggest attraction point for the producers.
Cool. So where do you see yourself in the next 2 to 3 years' time? I mean, cryptocurrency, it's going through major changes with regulations and all. So how do you think that will impact you, and where do you see Wabi going in the next 2 to 3 years?
I think there are sort of 2 parts of this question. Right. First one is about Wabi itself. Second one is about the grand vision for where we're heading. So I mean, our vision is building this an omni-channel sort of independent of any particular sort of sales format. So we want to be sold everywhere, and we want to be everywhere, and we want to be seen as this as a trusted channel, or if you want a component branding for the consumer. So basically, we want to become when the consumer sees product protected with YMI, it becomes sort of a minimum standard that ensures quality of both the product and the service that can be expected. So if you think it's like more to be a Starbucks of safe products, right? So there is like a minimum level of quality that we want to be. In terms of, I think it's a bit hard to say now in terms of like geographies or particular product offerings that we're going to have. But as Alex was saying, we'll be sort of adding more product categories probably before the end of the year. Where we're going to expand internationally, this is I think it's a bit hard to say right now, right? Because for us, we really believe that we should exploit the kind of if you want, the home market to the maximum extent before stretching us too thin, unless there is a very clear business model and very clear use case that we can adopt. Because again, we don't believe in sort of one size fits all approach. Right? It has to be very individual, because our technology is tailored to our business model and vice versa. In terms of Wabi usage, we see it as a lifeblood of an ecosystem, right? So it will be used within the loyalty point, and as the channel grows, just the circulation of Wabi will be going up and up and up.
When we were choosing the name, we were essentially choosing the Chinese name. From
I was wondering that too.
But also we wanted to choose something that a Westerner could pronounce.
Okay. Was it because of the frog suction pen?
There's frog and there's also digging.
So I was wondering, right? So when Domo actually approached me, I was like, why frog? Okay, anyway.
It's also digging.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So last question, final one. So is there any dates that you need to note, or for how long the IC will be kept open? Anything you want to address to the people?
I'd say just subscribe to the channel now. And I'm not just speaking about your YouTube channel, I'm speaking about our Slack and Telegram or emails channel, just so that you will be updated, right? There's going to be more things coming out regarding the bidding system, regarding the dates. Like I said, 7th of November is the likely date where we're going to start. It may be stretched throughout a month or so, but we're just confirming the exact date so that we're very clear on that as well.
Okay.
That's all.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello. This is Alex.
This is Yas,
We're from the Wabi team.
and you're watching
Crypto Grinders.